Hello. In this video, I would like to talk about a personal situation that I am finding myself in ever since that I started owning and living in this particular condo. So, I do live in a condominium unit at the moment and plan to for the next few years. Uh, so I talked a little bit about the struggle of condo ownership in a separate video earlier. It's called Condo Fraud and Malpractice. And I'll link that video below. And this video will be related to that. So I thought about not talking about it just because maybe this matter would go away and resolve itself, my current living situation. But it's still, you could say, escalating in a manner that just seems very unjust. And this is happening under below the radar of like law enforcement. These people are very good at skirting the law and basically borderline white collar criminals, you could say, and doing so in a way that is legal, though not strictly speaking, which is why I want to talk about this. And I would argue that most people are not aware of what's happening. So, to me, like, this is a huge problem because a lot of people own and live in condos. Maybe not like a ton of people, but it's not a small percentage of the population. So when you purchase and plan to live, and I'm not talking about a landlord situation, which can also be the case. So I'm talking about like you wanting to buy a condo to live in. You don't exactly expect the kind of problems that I'm going to be talking about. Like typically, what you expect is that there's a condominium board which you are allowed to join or not join, and that board, together usually with a management company, manages the day-to-day operations of the condo for regular maintenance and irregular maintenance, budget and stuff like that. So it's almost like it is really kind of like running a small nonprofit corporation, and that's how the condominium corporation is seen as under the law. It's basically like a nonprofit corporation, and there's a set of laws, at least in Canada, I think in most Western or democratic societies, that specifically govern condominium operation. Because as you can imagine, there would inevitably be conflicts and situations where, the law may have to get involved. So, my situation that I want to talk about is that for some reason, in Edmonton, which is located in Alberta, Canada, I kept running into management companies. So, like managers that you would hire to help run the building that also simultaneously are trying to flip your building to a developer or investor. Like there's like a huge conflict of interest. Where on the one hand they're pretending like they're your building manager, right? So that's what you hired them for and paying them for. But on the other hand, behind the scenes they're doing some shady business with people who are trying to buy up these condo buildings, like as entire buildings, so that they can become like landlords or developers, whatever the case may be. Usually, the ones I ran into are ones who want to become landlords of this like entire condominium building. So, and these people have truly mastered the sales tactic. And so I'm basically learning their sales tactics through this whole experience. Um, and like I said, because I have some, you could say, lie detecting abilities, that's also why I'm able to tell what tactics they're using to try to legally or borderline illegally buy up these buildings. Because as you can imagine, when someone tries to approach one of these buildings, oftentimes there's people who don't want to sell, and then there's people who want to sell. Generally speaking, unless you have some serious problem with the building, like some kind of special assessment, where basically everyone's very motivated to sell. But even in those cases, you might get like one or two people who don't want to sell, right? It's hard to predict that. But generally speaking, you're going to have some people who want to sell, and then some people who don't want to sell. So I happen to be in the latter case. Like, I plan to live here for the next few years while going to school. And it's in a pretty good area, like in terms of location-wise, and access to my school and transportation. Like, it's in a very good spot for me. So it's like, I have no motivation to leave. and I like my home very much. So, I have no incentive to leave. And but apparently most of the people in my building are landlords. Like they're like small hole landlords, and they don't live here, so they just have tenants. So basically, I live with um, mostly tenants. I don't know anyone in my building that's an actual owner living here. So you can imagine, like, this case is like you have a situation where a vast majority are landlord class, and then there's me, who's like wanting to live here basically and hold on to my unit for the long term. Like, I could also rent it out in the future if I wanted to, but for the foreseeable future, that's not my plan. Um, so you can already see there's this like conflict there, and according to like a democratic mindset, which is what most people are taught to believe. If you apply that in this case, then I should follow the majority, right? If the majority wants to sell in this case, then I should follow the majority. But to me, that's not a good case for the use of, you know, so-called democracy. And there's multiple issues. So, as I was saying, this management company. So this is like the second one that I've gone through since experiencing owning a condo unit. Again, you would have to watch my last video to know what I'm saying. Um, this second condo management company that I hired, along with other people on my board, it turns out that they're also doing sketchy things behind the scenes. And the reason I know that is, again, based on the way they were acting. That they would dodge questions when asked about large expenses on our condo accounts, acting as if they own our building, basically. Um, it's like, how dare you ask these questions, kind of thing. When it's like my duty as a condo board director to ask these kinds of questions, especially when it's really suspicious. And because of the fact that they constantly try to jack up our condo fees. So there was a pattern of, again, trying to increase the fees through no justifiable reasons. So as you can see, as both an owner and a board member, I would want to ask questions or look into, the history of our expenditures. And it turned out that there were a lot of unexplainable large expenses in this case. So as I began asking these questions, this condo manager in particular was very hostile towards me. Like, they became very hostile, trying to dodge questions and, just treating me like I basically have no power in this situation. So technically, the condo board, consisting of a few owners, they have the power to make decisions and to control whom to hire and not hire to manage their buildings. Like, technically, this is how it is by law. But these managers, they use these tactics to bully you and brainwash you into thinking that you have almost no power compared to them. So it's totally flipped backwards. And they act like it's almost like it's a kind of tactic they use to try to bully me, basically. So if you're someone who's like asking good questions and basically doing your job on the condo board, then they start doing this to you, and make your life really hard, basically. So what I'm saying is that I've been on the condo board of this particular building for the last almost 2 years now, and what I observe is that basically these managers are only really nice to people who approve of everything they do and don't ask hard questions, don't challenge them whatsoever. It's like submitting your power, giving your power over to them, basically. So they're nice to those people. But if you're like me and basically trying to check their power and check their what they're doing, like being accountable to the owners, then they start treating you like crap. And I think most people in this case would just kind of give up being treated like that. But I know better that you can't just jerk me around like that. I'm not someone you can just keep doing that without consequence. Um, so eventually, I ended up trying to change management once again. So this is the second time in my recent life that I had to do this because of you know just seeing that they're not doing their job, and we're overcharged. Like, the fees keep going up, like their management fees, and there's always some like extraneous fees that I can't even explain. This is how they make their money. And anecdotally, I've heard owners telling me that they collude with the contractors to double the price on things or doing things in an inefficient manner so that they can charge more money. This is literally what an owner told me. I don't know how they figured it out, but they did. And so I'm not the only person, and multiple owners have told me these managers are just doing terrible jobs and they want to switch. So so we ended up terminating their contract eventually. Like this happened recently after some efforts because you have to get the board sort of be on the same page, right? So there's some like administrative and logistical challenges there when you try to get more than one person to make a decision. So there's a lot of like just my own time and energy to do this kind of stuff, to educate the owners, to talk to the owners, to try to get them to work together. But unfortunately, what I gather is that because these owners have been jerked around for so long, a lot of them are frustrated and want to sell. So this is kind of how it led to this situation now that a lot of owners are trying to sell in my building, even though we're changing management company. Um, but I just want to say that it's like, interestingly enough, what happened the day after we formed the new board, and I think the managers knew what was going to happen, that they were going to be booted, like their contract was going to be terminated. The day after that happened, uh, these managers sent us a letter of intent to purchase the building from a third party, supposedly. And this happened to me at this other building as well, where right after the board terminated their contract to manage the building, they send some kind of realtor or purchaser to purchase the entire building at X amount of money. This is just like crazy to me, right? It's like it can't be a coincidence that you just happen to receive this letter, like because they were pretending to the board that they just accidentally received this letter to purchase the building. Again, the day after we um, reformed, like formed a new board, and before that there were already some conflicts with the manager. So, like I said, they were smart enough to know that perhaps they're being booted. And additionally, they were trying to argue against me in these group emails for suggesting that we need to go through a proper procedure, legal procedure for this, and that we should get an appraisal for the value of the building because these buyers they oftentimes just throw like a lowball price or even just like um, basically at a price that maybe most people would accept, but not necessarily everyone would want. So, anyways, I'm just trying to say that it's really quite shocking to me that these so-called managers are actually working to get rid of the building, like house flipping. Like you get what I mean by house flipping, right? It's like someone trying to acquire a building for a certain cost that's maybe below market value or true value long term, and then try to either sell it for a high price or just become landlord and own the whole thing, right? So this kind of thing happens all the time where I live, and there's like no law enforcement for this other than lawyers. Like you have to go through a lawyer that specializes in condo law in order to potentially do something to remedy the situation to make it like actually legal. But most people they don't want to pay the money for a lawyer, so I think I think in most cases they just bypass that and use pressure tactics. So for example, it's like we only need 75% owners to consent to the sale. It's like what they would say in those letters, which is like very unethical to me. Because what are the other 25 owners gonna do? Like you're just gonna try to pressure them out of the building? Is that what's gonna happen? So it's like these people who have money. What ends up happening is people with lots of money can just push out people like me who don't have a lot of money, and who could only, at least for now, only afford to own and live in a condo. Like I can't afford more than that, or I would have to rent. So do you see what's happening? Like on a larger scale, you can imagine that this is a kind of corrupting force in our society. Like if this is unchecked, basically, if there's no law or people to push back on these kinds of transactions behind the scenes, what's going to happen is basically groups and people with money can just push out the little guys, and that's already happening like almost everywhere. And I've heard stories about how at least where I live in Edmonton, in the downtown core area. Like I'm not in the downtown core area, but in the very core downtown area, basically there's almost no condos like mine where you have individual owners owning a condo. It's almost all giant corporations owning entire buildings. So that's what ends up happening if these people can just keep doing that. So you can imagine how this is very, this is really, especially, bad news for people who are not very wealthy. Because if you don't have much money, then you don't even have money to talk to a lawyer, right? You wouldn't even have money to talk to a lawyer. You would just have to be pressured to give up at some point, because if they take control of the board, like 75%, they can't make your life pretty hellish, again, without legal protection. You see where I'm going with this? Um, and for people who may be able to afford a lawyer, even then, it's not a great situation to deal with either. Like, to have to go through that lawsuit and legal process and not knowing where you might end up with that. Because for me, I think the law, I don't know what the law exactly like says about my situation. I believe I should be entitled to compensation in regards to having to move, having to find another place that's similar to this. Um, Compensation for not being able to mortgage another place because I'm a student right now, and having to rent at a much higher price in this area. Um, I think there's a moving costs, so there's like some extra costs besides the value of my unit that should be factored in. But obviously, these buyers, when they approach these buildings, they don't ever talk about these things. They just want to get like some kind of majority to agree, and then try to push the rest of us out. So that's what's happening. Um, yeah, and anecdotally, I've heard realtors tell me this is very common. This is common, and it's normal. Like, it's normal, according to this realtor, that management companies collude with investors, developers, and buyers to try to push out people like me. So that's what this place is turning into. It's basically what ends up happening is the law doesn't protect you. It only protects people with money, and that's one of the reasons I want to get into law, because that's not right. That's not justice. That's not what law is meant to be. So the system we have, even in Canada, is very backwards and corrupt. And a lot of these owners, their minds are very backwards as well. They have like no empathy for like the minority like me. It's like I've been serving on the board like as a volunteer to like try to improve the building, look after the building, and answer people's questions. Like, this is all like my own time, and they know that, and they still have no empathy for me. It's really quite shocking, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm not just someone who is just like living here. Even then, you should consider that. Like, I'm actively participating in the management of this building. So, you know, even most of these owners, their minds are very corrupt. All they care about is selling their units for a quick profit or something. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share. And this is something I've been dealing with for the past, like, again, half a year, on top of the other case I was dealing with, which I haven't dived into. That other unit I ended up having to sell, like, because of majority pressuring, basically. Um, so yeah, I really did not think that this was gonna be somehow the norm with condo ownership, and that's not what the law says either. Um, the law does require the board to go through a legal process. While these people, oftentimes, they just use various bullying tactics and not go through the proper channels. It's very problematic. Because how are you supposed to have any security in your home? It's like, literally, I plan to live here for the next 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden I'm told that I could be pressured to leave. That's basically what's happening. And you can imagine if you're like kind of attached to your home, like you like your home, it's kind of traumatic. Like, you're under the assumption that if you purchase this condo, you could potentially live here for the rest of your life, right? Potentially, unless something seriously bad happens. But out of nowhere, this rich asshole just tries to evict you from your home. That's how it's felt for me. Um, so I went through a lot of just like mental turmoil because of this. Because I kept having to deal with this over and over. Like these people are relentless. They don't stop. They don't stop trying. It's like I guess they've been successful in the past using these kinds of like sales tactics on people. So they just keep doing it. There's no one stopping them. They just keep doing it. So this is to me a big problem, at least where I live.